abuse part of the Compass Center is they had their executive director leave, and the board members came to me and they asked me to consider applying for the position of executive director. At which point, if some of you are looking for a job, here's some really excellent job advice for you. I told them all the reasons that I'd be really, really bad at being an executive director of a nonprofit, and then they hired me. So it really worked out. I was hired in 2015, worked there 4.5 years as executive director. I got to oversee a team of about 18 people who provided mental health services to survivors, advocacy services, and we also had a batterer intervention program, to help men and women who chose to use abuse as their part of their relationship. And then the last year I was at the Compass Center, the University of South Dakota came to me and asked me to be a professor and teach a family violence class, and I did that my last year there. It was just an evening class where I taught some of the criminal justice folks about family violence. Then my husband received and accepted a call to New Ulm, Minnesota, which meant I couldn't do that anymore and I was now jobless. Kingdom Workers happened to hear a presentation very similar to what you're going to hear today, and they said, we need to help churches to work in the space of assisting survivors, to which I heartily agreed. As executive director of the Compass Center, I saw far too many people whose faith community actually pushed them away, and they actually ended up leaving the church just because of the response they received from people in their church. And so it's really important to understand what folks who are in an abusive relationship or in a past relationship have gone through and be able to support and help them, because we don't want them leaving church. We don't want them to think God doesn't love me anymore. And we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. Today, we're going to talk through three things. We're going to do this fairly quickly. I do a 7-hour presentation where we go a lot deeper into this, so this is like 7-hour presentation in 45 minutes, so we're on steroids here. We're going to go really fast, so we're not going to be able to address all your questions, and you'll have my information. You can certainly contact me later if you have more questions. We're going to talk about relationship abuse first and identify what it is, define what it is. We're going to talk about what you as an individual person can do when you know somebody's in a situation that's bad. How do you help that person? And then we'll step back and we'll look at the church as a whole. How does the church as a whole become welcoming and helpful to a survivor so that they stay connected to God's word and coming to church? The first thing, what is relationship abuse? I told you the statistics said it's probably here. And that's because the statistic, which we're going to get to in the next slide, and then just kind of do the drum roll kind of thing, is super shocking for both men and women. Let's define the relationship abuse first. There are two things to think of. The first is that it's a pattern of behaviors. It's not something that happened once because of COVID and I lost my job and I just blew up and I'm sorry, you're forgiven. This is something that happens over and over in a relationship. And it's something that often keeps happening and keeps accelerating or getting bigger and more dangerous as the relationship goes on. It might be something that happens only every 2 months, but it is still a cycle of behaviors. And it's about maintaining control. One person it's very selfish, but I'm going to maintain control and I'm going to say what you can wear, what you can do, who you can see, what kind of job you have. I'm going to control you. So think of those two things when you think of abuse. It's control, and then it's that pattern of behavior. Here it is, the statistic. This is according to the Centers for Disease Control. Depending on what you think they're doing with COVID, you may or may not like them at the moment. But they do a survey, and the survey came back that 1 out of 3 women have reported that they will have physical violence, contact sexual violence, or stalking in their lifetime. 1 out of 3. Any guesses what the statistic is for men? 1 out of... No guesses? I know Laura knows already. The answer is 1 out of 3. It's slightly a higher 1 out of 3 for women, but it's 1 out of 3 for men as well. And as a congregation, I really urge you, don't forget the men. Because too often this is a thing that we say, this is a women's problem, and the men are just being bad. And it's not true. Women are being bad to their partner as well. It happens both ways. Now the difference between men and women is that it's happening and doesn't affect their life. So are they afraid that they're going to be in mortal danger? Or do they have concerns about mental health issues because of the violence? And there it changes a bit. There it's 1 out of 4 women say, yep, those things are happening and it's affecting my life. For men, it steps back quite a bit. 1 out of 9 say, yep, it's happening and it has some kind of effect on my life. Still, the statistics for both, we've got that number of folks in this room. And unfortunately, religion is not a barrier to this particular sin. We all sin. And so it happens in the church as much as it happens in the community at large. But why do we need to address it? This is research-based, and when somebody has their faith community supporting them and behind them, 2 unique things happen. They're more likely to leave that relationship that's abusive, and here we're talking a highly abusive relationship, and they're more likely to have feelings of well-being. The faith community, their congregation, having that support is incredibly important to people who are survivors. What is abuse? Normally in non-COVID times, we'd get up and move around the room. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to do with COVID. What I'm going to do is you all hopefully got a piece of paper. If not, there are more on the back, and Laura might call on you just to hand them out if somebody still needs a piece of paper. That piece of paper has 3 things written on it, going to annoying to can kill you. So there's 3 different stages. So you're going to look at a bunch of different behaviors and decide where you think those behaviors belong on that sheet of paper. Is it annoying? Can it kill you? Is it somewhere in the middle? You decide. And it's kind of an awkward space to do this in, but if you want to, if there's somebody kind of close to you, if you want to reach out and talk, I would rather have you talk with somebody as you do this rather than just do it yourself. So find people in front of you, behind you, next to you, to fill out where you think these things belong. The words that you have on your page are physical words. Like murder, I would think you would put under can kill you. But I also want you to think as far as mental health goes, like do I feel utterly worthless and I want to commit suicide? I would say that would go under can kill you. So mental health you want to think, and you also want to think spiritually. How is this affecting the person spiritually? Do I believe God doesn't love me because my abuser keeps telling me that? And so I don't believe God loves me anymore and has saved me. That goes under can kill you. That's a spiritual can kill you. So even though it sounds physical, think of the mental health as well as the spiritual facets of the abuse. I have a whole bunch of different kinds of abuse that can happen. With a partner or a few people, I'm just going to give you about 5 minutes. Start to write where do you think those belong in that line between annoying and can kill you. About 5 minutes. I want to hear talking, please. Talk with other people. You can get started. reason I have you taking these and putting them down on a sheet of paper from kind of light abuse to really heavy can kill you abuse is because abuse isn't just one size fits all. And my guess is if we had everybody compare where they put the different pieces, no two papers would be the same. Because some of it is your background that you bring into looking at this is going to change. The one I see most often that gets kind of in all three is stalking. I'll have some people that put it as not very difficult, and I'll have some people put that in can kill you. So some of these, there's no right answer or wrong answer. It's just where you think it is. The reason I show this to you is because a lot of the questions I get are around, well, why does somebody stay in this kind of relationship if it's so bad? And the reality is, my husband was here, but he left because he's seen this before. But if I went out on my first date with him and he told me I was a fat slob and I was lucky that he went on a date with me because nobody else would go on a date with such a fat slob, or if he slapped me, he would not be my husband today. Because abuse doesn't start as abuse. It starts loving and it's a great relationship, and it only gets introduced gradually, and only gradually does it increase to where there are more difficult ramifications. And so it happens on that spectrum. And it could land anywhere in there. Our job is let's address it when it's really not murder. Let's address it when somebody is putting down their spouse and say, hey, that's not okay. Let's start there and not let it keep going until it's something that's really hard to control. I'm going to go into just a few types of abuse. The first is physical abuse. We often think of this when we think of domestic abuse. Physical abuse can also be the lack of abuse. Neglect often happens in older relationships where one person needs medical care or needs drugs in order to maintain their health, and their partner does not give them access to that. So neglect is also part of physical abuse. I put the picture of the man up there just because we always forget. It happens to men, and I just want to keep reminding you it happens to men as well. Sexual abuse, is there rape in marriage? Yes. Yes means yes, no means no. But that can also be things like birth control. I don't want to have a child, so I'm going to take birth control and not tell my husband. That's considered sexual abuse as well. I'm controlling what happens with our relationship and not letting you make the decision with me. It could also be, I had a friend, and this is TMI that she told me, but if she wanted her husband to do something, she had some kind of an outfit that she would lay out on the bed, and that was her way to get the husband to do what she wanted. So she was using sex to actually get her way, rather than as an act of love. So sexual abuse can be it's not just rape, it can be other things as well. Verbal and emotional abuse, I use this picture of a gaslight because there's a newer term around called gaslighting. Anybody hear about gaslighting? More and more people are hearing about it. It basically means the one person is trying to make their partner feel like they are crazy. And you'll hear a lot of those words when there's a relationship with gaslighting. It involves an awful lot of lying, where the abuser is lying to kind of throw their partner off balance. And they are such good and convincing liars that the partner believes what they hear. An extreme example is somebody who came to the Compass Center where I worked, and she always had drinking glasses on one side of her sink and plates on the other side. She came home from work one day, opened the cupboard to grab a glass, and the plates were there. And then the other one she opened, and there were the glasses. And she went to her husband and she said, "Why did you flip around the plates and the glasses? I liked where they were." And he told her, "I didn't flip them around. The glasses have always been on that side of the sink. I don't know what you're talking about." She's like, "No, you moved them, you're joking, come on." "No, they've always been there. You're crazy." And she actually ended up believing that she just had not remembered what side the glasses were on. That is a really big example of gaslighting. And it really takes an emotional toll on somebody where they do feel they're going crazy and they can't trust themselves and what they know to be true. And so they rely more heavily on their partner because their partner knows everything and they need the help of the partner, and so that's just one more way to get control. Financial abuse. I told you one of my biggest questions is why don't they leave? A lot of it's financial. If you needed to leave and you had kids and you didn't have a job, what are you going to do to stay safe with your kids, to feed them, to house them, and you don't have a job and you don't have access to money? Financial abuse we see in almost every relationship. It might sound like only have allowance. I can only spend $20 in a week, and if I spend it, then I don't get to spend any more money this week. Or it might be, I have $100 to spend on groceries, and I have to give my wife or my husband the slip to show that that's how much I bought, and here's my change, and that's what it could look like. Jumping up to what it looks like in a really tough situation. I worked with a woman who found out that her husband had been abusing her daughter. It was a second marriage. And so she was leaving, but she kept saying, and he was actually in jail because it was sexual abuse. And she kept saying, I don't know how I'm going to feed the kids. I don't know how I'm going to feed the kids. And I kept thinking, well, I get that this is a really tough time for you, but let's make them peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And then later on I found out, because a detective came in, he said, hey, here's money that was in his truck. We have to keep the truck because we have to process it, but you can have the money. And she said, that's his money. I can't take that. He's going to be mad at me. And the detective was really great and just made her take the money. But that was the relationship that she had. She had a job. Her money from that job went to a bank account that was only in his name. The vehicles were in his name, the house was in his name. She literally had no access to money. And so leaving that type of relationship was really tough, and that's why he did it. I'm going to keep you in my control, and I'm not going to let you leave, because I have all the money, and it's really difficult to leave if you have nothing. Cyber abuse, we find this more and more. I always talk about, there's that app where you can find where somebody is. It can be a good thing. I am traveling a lot. Actually, my husband and I don't have this yet. He probably should. Good to know where I am in case something happens. But when you use that app and you call up somebody, well, why are you at Walmart? Or you said you were at work, but now I see that you're at your friend's house. Why are you at your friend's house? Or what do you do? And I see. So that's abusive. To be tracking somebody and knowing where they are and demanding they account for where they are. That's just too much when it becomes abusive. It can be somebody, this happens especially in dating relationships, somebody hacks into a Facebook account of the other person or whatever social media, and they make posts as if they were that person that are demeaning to the family or to their friends, because again, they're trying to push them away from that support system of family and friends. Cyber abuse can be a lot of different things. And then the spiritual. This is why I'm here and why Kingdom Workers is involved. The spiritual abuse is huge. And it can be taking Bible passages and twisting them for the abuser so that it sounds like, well, you've got to listen to me. I had a friend whose husband used, wives submit to your husbands. And he used that as his basis for hours-long lectures to her about what she should and shouldn't do. She wasn't allowed to blow her nose with toilet paper. She could only use Kleenex because wives submit to your husbands. And so he took that Bible passage, which had a very good relationship way for people to be, where I get to submit to my husband, and he made it into a law, and he made it into something where he used that to control her. We see that if it's people of different faiths, they could mock your faith, not allow you to go to church anymore. And then the one that really bugs me is we find that people who have been abused come in and they really believe they're so awful and worthless. God doesn't love them. To which you can't say, well, we're all worthless because they're going to hear the wrong message. But to understand, God loves us no matter what. And I don't care what your abuser has said to you. You are a loved child of God, and he died for you. So that to me is so important, that we get into this place and we feel comfortable approaching and talking to somebody so we can help them. Really fast, how do you know if somebody's in a relationship that is violent or abusive? Trust your gut. Definitely you'll look for physical, you'll look for broken bones or eyes. Isolation, they're not allowed to go out with anybody anymore, or they can't go to family meals anymore unless the abuser's with them. Check-ins, always calling. What are you doing? Where are you? When are you coming home? Who are you with? Money, we talked about financial quite a bit already. I'm more reserved if I'm usually outgoing and bubbly and everybody, talks to me and I talk to everybody and then I start dating somebody and all of a sudden I'm not that way anymore. That could be a clue. Constant phone calls, the checking in. What can we do? You suspect somebody's in an abusive relationship. Maybe you don't know. What do you do? Two things. It's super simple and it's amazingly difficult. First thing you'll do is build trust. And it might be a sister-in-law of mine, it might be my brother, and we already have some degree of trust, but I need to build trust in this space. And it might sound something like, that was really tough how Jay talked to you. And I didn't like how he called you a fat slob. How are you doing? So you're showing that that's abuse, because a lot of people don't even, I've had so many people say, is this abuse? Yeah, that's abuse, that's not okay, it's not healthy. And ask how they're doing. And more likely, they'll say, oh, everything's fine. Everything's fine. And it might take you years to build up enough trust that they start to tell you. Some people will just gush the whole thing out right away. It's the way God made them. For most people, though, it's going to be baby steps. Oh, yeah, things aren't going so well with Jean lately. All right, tell me about that. Tell me more. And so it's being able to listen to those little hints. Or, yeah, John kind of got mad and blew up last night. All right, tell me more. Does that happen a lot in your relationship? So they're going to give you baby steps just to see how you react. And if my reaction to my sister-in-law is, oh, Jason wouldn't do that, come on. She's not going to keep trusting me and telling me. So look for those baby steps and just keep building that trust. And then finally, they're going to tell you something that's pretty horrible, because we're talking abusive relationships. And it's going to be really tough for you to hear. And I put this gift up there because I want you to think of it as a gift. They have so much trust and faith in you that they have shared something incredibly personal. And it's a gift, and I kind of chose a gift that doesn't look all that pretty, because it's not going to feel like a pretty gift. It's going to feel really heavy. But think of it as a gift. And I'm sure all of you had parents or aunts or uncles who taught you, when you get a gift, the first thing you say is, thank you. And you might not know anything else to say to them, but remember, it's a gift. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with me that very difficult thing. And that might be where you stop, because you just don't know what else to say. And that's fine. You're showing empathy and you're thanking them. If you can continue with some empathy, that must be really difficult. I can't imagine how tough that is for you to listen to every single day. And just start to, you want to draw them to you and to show, man, that's really awful. I can't imagine working with that. Because you don't know what's happening. You can't say, oh yeah, I get that, that's awful. Because you don't know. Even if you've been in an abusive relationship, this one's different. You don't know how they're feeling. But acknowledge that has to be tough. And then believe. Believe what they tell you. Whether it is your brother, or an elder of the church, or the preschool teacher that everybody loves, that's being said as the abuser, believe. Doesn't mean you have to believe in a month or 2 months, but right when they tell you, believe. And then you've probably seen this Geico commercial. But it's a good reason of why we need to believe. Geico does not sponsor Kingdom Workers, but they just have a great commercial in this space. When we are in trauma, we do not react in a rational way. A whole genre of movies is based on that. Who's watched a horror movie and thought, why did they go in the basement? It just doesn't make sense. The reality is God made our brains to not do what's rational. Because if we did what's rational when a lion comes in this room, if he did not make that rational brain go offline, I go, lion escaped from the zoo. Where is the nearest zoo that has a lion? I bet that lion's kind of hungry and he wants to. I can't sit there and just think. I need to react. And God made our brains that way to stay safe. The part of our brain that thinks shuts down. The part of our brain that reacts is hypervigilant and helps us to react. Adrenaline's going through our bodies and we're ready to respond. When people respond to violence, they respond in 4 ways. 2, I'm sure you've heard of. 2, we're going to delve into a little bit. Lion comes in this room, I might choose to fight the lion. Wouldn't be, again, a rational decision, but it's the way my brain is wired. And I'm going to try and fight the lion. Maybe I've got a concealed carry permit, I got a gun, but I'm going to do something to try and get that lion out of here. Another common one is I'm going to run away. I see that lion, I'm going to go for the nearest store. Some people are going to see that lion and they are going to be physically unable to move. They're going to stand still. This is how I would react just based on the past experience I have with traumatic things. I would sit here and do absolutely nothing. Does that make sense? No. But again, it's just the way God has wired our brains, and that's the way my brain would respond to trauma. And then there's one last one, and it's called fawning. Fawning we see with domestic abuse victims. If you have somebody who is really abusive to you, verbally, physically, spiritually, you're going to try and be super nice to that person so they don't abuse you more. And so to us on the outside, I might say, hey, Joe, I don't know what your problem is. You're always getting up and getting coffee for your wife in Bible class and making sure that she's comfortable. And that might be a hint that it's actually an abusive relationship. I'm being super nice so I don't get abused when we go home. And so if somebody comes to you and says, this is happening, believe. No matter who it is, no matter their response, even if that response doesn't make sense to you, believe. And then here's where we get to the tough part. How can I help you? You thank them, you've reacted with empathy, you believe them. What do you want to do? How can I help you? And this is the super difficult part because, especially the men out there, you are going to want to fix it. You are going to see the problem. This person, they're going to die if they stay in that relationship. They need to leave. You are going to see the clear road to fixing it. And I'm going to caution you, this is the weird, hard thing in this space. Don't fix it. It is that person's job to decide what they want to do and to go forward being as safe as possible. We cannot fix it even if we want to fix it. And the reason is multiple, but this is a really short video that shows a good reason why. You can see her problem, I hope. She's got a nail in her head. And she's with somebody who's going to want to fix it. And watch what happens when he tries to fix it. And then he goes out of fix-it mode and he's just very empathetic. That must be really hard. And watch what happens when he becomes empathetic.
goodness. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing.
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail.
See, you're not listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Come on, if you would just
Don't.
All right, it was about the nail, and he had a good solution. She wasn't ready to listen. And when he tries to problem solve, did you see how it just pushed her away and she wasn't ready for anything that he had to say? And then when he's like, oh, that must be really difficult, that must be really hard, it drove them together. And that's what we need in this space. You are going to want to fix it, and that's a good reaction to have, but the best thing is to just listen, ask them how you can help, and then do what they say. We don't have a ton of time, so I'm just going to quickly go through this review. Thank you. They've given you a gift, say thank you. And if that's all you can remember to do, that's great. Respond with empathy. You know, that must be really difficult, that must be really hard. Ask them how you can help. And then the most difficult, follow through. If they want to get back in the relationship, help them do that, but ask them, how can we do this safely? Let's plan for what happens if it happens again. How do you keep safe? And here, remember, the rational part of the brain is not thinking because they're in trauma mode. So help them. What are the pros and the cons of staying or leaving? And help them start to think through it a little bit more rationally and find out what's keeping them in a highly abusive relationship. All right, we're finally to the end. What do we as an entire church do? And this is where Kingdom Workers comes into play. We have created a survivor ministry to help churches create support groups for survivors of abuse. Again, the why, remember, when that faith community is behind you, you have better feelings of well-being and are more likely to leave that highly abusive relationship. What we do as a community of believers is very important. Kingdom Workers lives in that sweet spot between the three circles. We engage the local church to be volunteers for our programs. I'm just providing training, I provide materials, but we look and rely on the local volunteers who want to help survivors. Gospel proclamation, again, that's why I'm doing this. We need to tell folks who are in a very tough situation, God does love you. We might not know his plan for you, but he loves you. And this is for some good that you might not know till you're in heaven, but it's for your good. And then Christian welfare. We want to help them through the feelings of trauma and help them address the trauma in their life. And it could be, we talked mostly about somebody in a current relationship. It could also be somebody where it happened 10 years ago, and it still is bothering them, or they're still getting triggered. So it could be anybody who's been in a relationship abuse and wants to go to a support group. Support groups are free. Everything that I do and provide to Peace is 100% free. We've got some amazing donors at Kingdom Workers, and they have enabled it so that whatever I do, there's like 15 hours of training, that's all free, travel's free, everything is free. So first of all, we want to take that away so it's easier for churches to be able to do this ministry. It's a community outreach opportunity where you can reach out to other churches in the community. You can reach out to CADA is your local shelter that they might be able to send people here who might want a support group. We're doing this in New Ulm, and CADA has an office in New Ulm, and they are sending folks who might be interested to the church for the support group at the church. We do safety confidentiality are huge throughout the program. We don't have time to unpack how we do that, but that's fundamental to everything we do in this program. And I don't want just the survivors to be safe, but I want the facilitators, the volunteers to be safe as well. And so that's woven throughout the program. And then it's a turnkey. There's a ton of training. Church training is like this because we want everybody to kind of be on the same page and to know how to respond to somebody who discloses abuse and be helpful to that person. So whether they go to a facilitator or anybody in the congregation, we're all trained to know what to do. And this is a good first training just to give you the bare bones. How do you help a survivor? The coordinator and facilitators are the volunteer positions. The groups only last 10, 12 weeks. I want it to have a beginning and an end because those facilitators need time off after listening to some abusive stories. And you guys get tons of training for the facilitators. We talk, the whole 7 days is about domestic abuse, identifying, talking about trauma, how do you help as a church, how do you help as an individual. And then there's another 5 hours where we just work with the facilitators. How do you facilitate a group? And practice going through different situations. How do you work with a person that is always talking and doesn't let anybody else get in? And then we have lots of materials, including lesson plans for facilitators to use that just takes you, first do this, then do this, so you don't have to figure it out. And I have lots of resources for pastors too, because we want the entire church trained and ready. And so I got 1 minute. What do I want you to do? First, practice what we talked about today. Start building trust in somebody who's in a relationship you think might be unhealthy or abusive. And start putting into action ways that you can respond if they do talk about their abuse. And then definitely share what we talked about with others. Because we want as many people as possible in this church ready to respond to survivors. And then for the support group, if you have an interest, it doesn't mean you have to do it, but if you have an interest, we have volunteer positions for the coordinator and the facilitators. Kind of gives you an idea of what kind of time commitment we're talking about, different things that those positions do. I have those resources. Pastor Molstead also has those resources that he can give to you as well. Reach out to me. I've got my card on the table. You can ask more questions for follow-up. And I would love to see this as something that you do here. And I know we're kind of right up against time for questions, but I can be right outside and answer your questions outside of the class. Thank you.
And we thank you so much, Michelle, for your presentation today. The desire with this presentation is to see if there perhaps is some interest in our congregation, if there's individuals that may be interested in forming a group or starting a program like this even at Peace Congregation. If there is an interest like that, we do also encourage you, hopefully what you've learned today, to maybe be thinking more about how you as an individual might be able to help those that are hurting in your own life or in our own congregation. Michelle is also a great resource for this. If you have any sort of questions for private or sort of individual circumstances, please direct them towards her, or I can also direct you to where to go with that as well. So